coming to an end.
He jumped before he was pushed because, of course, the Conservative Party so angry with John Bercow that they were going to break a long-standing convention and actually stand a candidate against him in the constituency of Buckingham, which would have, in effect, prevented his re-election as an MP and therefore re-election as Speaker, deciding to bow out today, announcing to the House of Commons that he would not be standing beyond October the 31st. He would stand down tonight, in fact, if they go for a general election. But, and this is a crucial but, Nigel, by saying that he will stand down on October the 31st, he allows the opportunity for a stitch-up with the selection of the new Speaker in those 2 weeks preceding the 31st. He's been quite clever about it because he doesn't, what he said, and he said it in the Commons, was he didn't want the whips on the government side or the Labour side trying to stitch up the selection of a new Speaker, because this is an incredibly important appointment in the House of Commons, not just based on party lines, but based on Remain Leave lines. And so what he didn't want was he didn't want to stitch up by the government whips to, in effect, put in, as he would see it, a soft touch into that position. He would like somebody very much along who's taken very much the same approach to the chair as he has.
I'm sure he would. And can we listen to a bit of John Bercow today, please?
My wife, Sally, and our 3 children, Oliver, Freddie, and Jemima.
I don't know what that's got to do with anything, but there we are. He's off to spend more time with his family, and as far as I'm concerned, good riddance. I mean, we've had speakers for centuries who've been neutral. Theo, this one hasn't even pretended to be neutral.
No, John Bercow has insisted when he has been asked about it in the House of Commons that he is neutral. You'll remember, of course, that very heated debate about 6 months ago when an MP, a Conservative MP, Brexiter, stood up and said to him, but what about that sticker in your car, which had
the B word to Brexit. Yeah.
And John Bercow got very upset. I think it was Adam Holloway made the point in the House of Commons, got very upset, saying, well, how dare you insinuate that something my wife believes is because of my own political leanings when it comes to remaining in the European Union. The argument has been that he has, one of the reasons we found ourselves in this situation with this long drawn-out process is that every opportunity, John Bercow, his critics claim, have found a way. He's found a way of giving extra debates, standing order debate, emergency
to
debates,
take over the job of the executive.
And then, as you say, allowing Parliament to take over the job of the executive, which is what happened this week. Now we've got, incidentally, because it's of a debate that John Bercow has granted, we have a humble address brought by Dominic Grieve in the House of Commons, forcing the government to reveal all of its no-deal preparation under Operation Yellowhammer and communications relating to the prorogation of Parliament, the plans for prorogation of Parliament. And it is a humble address. It's an old, arcane bit of parliamentary procedure, but crucially, it is binding. And therefore, if it is passed tonight, the government will have to make those documents available by 11 o'clock on Wednesday.
There's a moral of the story, never put anything in writing. Theo, thank you very much indeed. And whilst all that's been going on in Westminster, Boris Johnson has been over in Dublin meeting the Taoiseach. And of course, Mr Farage has been pretty aggressive in many ways about the backstop, about us leaving the European Union. But there is a distinct change in tone. I wonder whether the resignation of his brother, which must have wounded him. I mean, goodness me, personal family betrayal would wound any of us, let alone the Prime Minister when you're up there in the front. Amber Rudd, of course, walking out. The threat may be of more. And let's just listen to Boris Johnson's approach to Brexit in the run-up to the leadership.
I think we should be very positive about Brexit, and we should not be terrified of a no-deal Brexit. We should not be terrified of coming out on WTO terms. We will make sure we look after the agriculture.
Optimistic.
And I think a lot of the negativity about a WTO Brexit has been wildly overdone. We will, of course, be pushing our plan into action. Come what may. Do or die. Come what may.
Do or die, come what may. Bullish, optimistic. That was Boris. Vote for me. Make me Prime Minister. Do or die. We're leaving on the 31st of October. No deal, no problem. Big bravado. Boris. Here was Boris Johnson in Dublin today.
Like you, I've looked carefully at no deal, I've assessed its consequences both for our country and yours. And yes, of course, we could do it. The UK could certainly get through it. But be in no doubt that outcome would be a failure of statecraft for which we would all be
Well, that's all a
responsible.
bit different.
And
isn't
so,
it?
for the sake of business, of farmers, and for millions of ordinary people who are now counting on us to use our imagination and creativity to get this done, I want you to know I would overwhelmingly prefer to find an agreement.
Well. Isn't that a different Boris? Isn't that a very different Boris? Do you think Boris is selling out? 0345 6060 All this nonsense last week that we heard from Emily Thornberry and everybody else that Boris is going for no deal. No, he isn't. Boris wants to reheat Mrs May's treaty, and it's very different to the terms upon which he was elected. I wonder whether Tristan on the Isle of Man agrees with me. Good evening, Tristan.
Good evening, Nigel. Yes, I've been following this closely for donkey's years, very closely, and I'm starting to get really uncomfortable about it. I've got the feeling there's a complete stitch-up going on. There's an elaborate charade being played, and we're all being tugged along, and at the end of the day, we're going to be tripped either into May's withdrawal agreement or a 2-year extension, kick the can down the road. I don't get it. He's the Prime Minister. He can make a decision. He had the option to advise the Queen not to give that surrender bill royal assent. That would have been perfectly legitimate. A private member's bill overruling a government. When have we seen that before?
But Tristan, don't forget, this is the same Boris Johnson who twice voted against the withdrawal agreement and the third time voted for it. So what else did we expect, really?
Well, it looks like a duck. It quacks like a duck.
There you
My
go.
guess is it's probably duck.
Tristan, thank you very much indeed. John Bercow will be on Strictly by Christmas, I bet you, says Graham from St Giles in London. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC at 6:15 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Rizzi.
Suspended for the next 5 weeks after MPs vote tonight on whether to hold a snap general election ahead of the Brexit deadline. After 10 years in the job, John Bercow's announced he's quitting as Commons Speaker and the MP for Buckingham at the end of October.
Now, look, I know he's got an impossibly tough job. I know he's got a parliament against him. I know he's had a brother let him down. Amber Rudd break her promises. And indeed, a very tough decision over what to do at that European summit on the 17th and 18th of October. But he has changed his tone completely. Is Boris selling out, is the question I'm asking you. Andy from Portsmouth says, I think we all got carried away in believing Boris was a no-deal Brexiteer. I think what's written in the stars is there's bigger change to come over the next few months. Ron says, it's not fair at all, Ron. Boris's brother, Joe, and his wife are Remainers. His sister, Rachel's a Remainer. His father, Stanley's a Remainer. Are we being had by a Remainer Johnson family? Ron, you can't judge Boris by the rest of his family any more than the fact Nicholas Soames happens to have Winston Churchill as his grandfather makes any difference to who Nicholas Soames is. And we really got to stop doing this. Boris is his own man. But here's the problem, folks. Boris only joined the Leave campaign at 5 minutes to midnight. You know, for all those years, in the run-up to it, Boris had always believed in us being in the European Union. He then went for the Leave campaign, and as a Brexiteer, thank goodness that he did, because he made a very important difference. And then he twice votes against the withdrawal agreement, and then he votes for it. Will Bercow get a knighthood now? I'm asked on Facebook. He won't get a knighthood. The Remain establishment will give him a peerage, maybe even a dukedom. Who knows? Simon is a new caller from the constituency of Bracknell. So, Simon, you're now represented by a Liberal Democrat called Philip Lee. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not very happy about that. I must admit, I did join the local Tory party to register my disgust with him some months ago, about 6 months ago, with a view to, talking to the party to get rid of him, because he's long been on the Lib Dem sort of list. He's long been a problem in the
But Simon, he's a Democrat. He's bound to give you a by-election, isn't he?
Oh, of course not. That would be unthinkable. Just like Anna Soubry. The truth is, with this Boris situation, my big fear is that he'll bring a tweaked version, as you say, of Theresa May's deal back.
Reheated, I call it, yeah.
And then what will happen is Labour will just vote for it. They're desperate not to face their constituents.
Well,
and then
we
they
did,
can go onto the streets and say, we voted for it, there it's done. And then, but that will destroy the Conservatives because you will rightly campaign on the side of this isn't Brexit. People will be angry. Brexiteers will come to you. Split the Tory vote. I mean, you're entering into hung Parliament territory.
Simon, I think the withdrawal agreement, even without the backstop, is an absolute catastrophe. It is not Brexit at all. It leaves us completely beholden to the institutions of the European Union, who can do what the hell they want to us for the next 14 months, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it may be. We'll be under the European Court of Justice for a minimum of 8 years. And I think if he goes for this, it'll destroy the Conservative Party. That's my view. And it may take time for it to sink in, because one or two people might say, oh, well, thank goodness it's done. But I think it's a catastrophe. But that's where he's going, Simon, isn't it?
But the best bit from the EU's position is they get £39 billion and they keep the hostage.
Yes.
Most of the time, people give you the hostage
back.
The
ransom. Simon, I agree with you. And it won't be just $39 billion. Because of course we'll extend another couple of years. You can chuck another $25 billion on that. It's a disaster. Simon, I'm with you. I agree with you. Come on, someone ring up and tell me Boris is being pragmatic. He's doing the right thing, that I've got this wrong. 0345 6060 973 on YouTube. Harry says to me, Boris is showing his true colours. He's a Remainer. That's a bit unfair. I mean, he did. Oh, okay, I get it. He wrote 2 articles, one to back Remain, one to back Leave, but he did back Leave. But Boris has never been a true believer, and that is part of the problem. Matt is a new caller from Lincoln. Good evening, Matt.
Good evening, Nigel. Hope you're well.
I'm all right, you know. I mean, in some ways, Matt, I'm actually rather pleased Parliament's closing down tonight, because every day when I see what goes on there, it drives me potty.
Yeah, it's got crazy. I'm one of the rare people that's a Remainer turned Brexiteer. And I just think we need to get on with it now. And the EU's attitude over the backstop, which you've said many times, is just complete nonsense. Because if we go with no deal, then there's no requirement for a backstop. So it's them saying
which is so bizarre, Matt, isn't it? Isn't it bizarre?
It's disingenuous and dishonest, isn't it? But what I wanted to ask you, because I'm really interested in your view on this, is the idea of another referendum where Leave stays on the table, and it's the only 2 options. We leave with a withdrawal agreement, or we leave with a clean Brexit. And it strikes me it would call out all the politicians that say they want to, respect the will of the people, but actually they're Remainers. But it might bring the country together, and I just wondered your view on it.
Well, Matt, the problem is this. I cannot support a second referendum in any circumstances, with any question, with this current Parliament sitting there. They have shown utter contempt over the last 3.5 years for the result of the referendum, as they would for any other referendum that they didn't like. So, Matt, I do understand if there had to be a second referendum, it should be about how we leave, and I get the logic of that. But I frankly, what is the point in having a second referendum with this Parliament, Matt?
I do agree, but my worry there is what happens, and your previous caller said similar. I mean, what happens if we end up with another hung Parliament? We just go around in this circle forever.
Well, we might end up with a hung Parliament, but we might not. And I think that, and frankly, when you've got a Prime Minister who lost 4 votes last week, he's on the verge of losing another big vote tonight. I mean, this is a zombie Parliament. Vernon Bogdanor, the constitutional expert, said it was a wretched Parliament. Matt, you can't go on with a Parliament that doesn't function, surely.
Well, I agree with that, and I also agree with but Boris isn't really interested in Brexit. Boris is interested in himself, and Brexit just helps his cause.
What a thing to say about our Prime Minister, Matt. Honestly, wash your mouth out with soap and water. Matt, thank you for your call. Nigel, you will never work Boris out. He keeps you guessing. Crafty as a fox. He's chasing the hound, says Chris from Bedford. Well, I very much hope you're right, but I doubt it. I said 2 weeks ago on here on Monday night, mark my words, all this talk of no deal, Boris is going for the withdrawal agreement. Oh, the abuse I got on Twitter and elsewhere. But I think we're seeing the real Boris. He just can't face any more of this. And of course, there are another 100 MPs sitting in the Conservative Party in Westminster who voted Remain. Now, they may not all be on the verge of resignation, but it is a major problem for him. Marcus from Manchester says, these MPs have no vision, no imagination, no ambition for the UK, so it's no wonder this PM, Boris, will bend over backwards to please them. Chris is calling from Colchester. Good evening, Chris.
Hi, Nigel. Sorry I missed you last week. It was too late by the time I got there.
Oh, I was in Colchester last Monday, wasn't I?
Yeah.
Absolutely, I was. Do you know something, Chris? With all that's going on, last Monday seems a very long time ago.
Tell me about it.
I played you the clips earlier. I played you Boris, talking to the audience in those big leadership debates when, of course, LBC's Ian Dale was chairing most of them. And then I've, played you Boris, ever so humble, in Dublin today. It's a big change, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I think it shows his true colours. He was just trying to get support from a lot of the membership and people like Jacob Rees-Mogg. I said to you about a month ago, actually, I thought he'd bring the deal back and sort of change the name of the back top to the front top or something and try and get it through. I think that was his plan all along. But he wanted no deal on the table, so he had that to the EU so he could try and get something changed. Maybe as well say, look, I've got a free trade deal with America. Say, look, we can walk away and then get this deal through. And I think that was his plan all along. What it shows is the leader changes, but the policy doesn't. I think he's basically Theresa
Do you
May
mean he's Theresa... Go on, sorry.
On steroids. It happens gradually with Theresa May, but with Boris, it's happened very quickly. He's kind of changed because he's had to, because it's been such a short space of time.
Well, Chris, I very much hope you're wrong, but
So do I.
think you're probably right. And if you are right, then what Boris has done is he's marched his army up to the top of the hill, hasn't he? With all this do-or-die stuff. If he tries to march them back down again, what are the implications for the Conservative Party? I mean, what happens, Chris, if we have to extend after the 31st of October? What happens to Boris then?
Well, I think they're finished. But this is typical Boris, isn't it? He said he'd lay in front of a bulldozer and then didn't turn up in Parliament. He does this a lot. Yeah. And I think the Conservative Party is tearing themselves to pieces. And if he does now show that he's pro deal and he's been lying all the time, it's a disaster. Whereas if he went for no deal and it did a patch with the Brexit Party, then it's in a landslide. So it's up to him.
I know. Even John Curtis saying today that a pact like that would give at least a majority of 40 to Boris as Prime Minister. But hey, Chris, thank you for your call. Tom from Glossop in Derbyshire says, someone spiked your coffee, Nigel. Boris will take us out with no deal in the end. You just wait. Tom, after the news, I'm going to replay the clip and see whether you think that. But for now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show. It's 6:30 in time for the news with Lisa Aziz.
0345 6060 973.
I so well remember Theresa May, early 2017, the Lancaster House speech, and there she was, using words and phrases I'd used for 2 decades. I thought, this is it. No deal's better than a bad deal. It's all happening. And then 108 times she told us we're leaving on March the 29th, and it all came to nothing. And then we got Boris Johnson. And let's have a listen to Boris Johnson in the run-up to the leadership campaign when he talked about no deal.
I think we should be very positive about Brexit, and we should not be terrified of a no-deal Brexit. We should not be terrified of coming out on WTO terms. We will make sure we look after the agriculture. And I think a lot of the negativity about a WTO Brexit has been wildly overdone.
We will, of course, be pushing our plan into action. Come what may. Do or die. Come what may.
Do or die, bravado Boris, wonderful stuff, and gosh, we all those of us on the Brexit side, we all wanted to believe it, just as we wanted to believe Theresa May at Lancaster House. But let's listen to the Prime Minister in Dublin today.
Like you, I've looked carefully at...
sounds different already, doesn't it?
I've assessed its consequences, both for our country and yours. And yes, of course, we could do it. The UK could certainly get through it, but be in no doubt that outcome would be a failure of statecraft for which we would all be responsible. And so, for the sake of business, of farmers, and for millions of ordinary people who are now counting on us to use our imagination and creativity to get this done, I want you to know I would overwhelmingly prefer to find an agreement.
So there we are, folks. They're the 2 Borises, just separated by 8 weeks. Is Boris Johnson selling out? Is no deal? Was it never really ever really what Boris was going to do. And that's what I'm beginning to think more and more and more. Patrick is a new caller from Belfast. Good evening, Patrick.
Good evening, Nigel. Yeah, so I think that he is leading everybody on in the fact that he will be doing no deal Brexit. I do believe he will.
Oh, really?
Yes, and he's over there.
And why do you believe that, Patrick?
Because he's over there giving the Irish people exactly what they want. Yeah, we're not going to do anything wrong. We're going to stay with you and keep with the European Union. But he's not really. He's put too much time and effort and investment. I mean, he's wiped out the rebels. He's lost his brother. Amanda runs away. You know, it's a time for Brexit to actually happen, and I think he's going to deal with it. But the thing which is funny is you put out the full-page spread, let's come together, let's make Brexit happen, and now all of a sudden you're saying, no, he doesn't. It just seems...
Well, Patrick, I mean, listen, you know, I've said very consistently for the last week that if he does the right thing, I want to support him. But every day that goes by makes me question whether he's got the courage to do it.
I think he does. I don't think he has much choice.
Patrick, don't you... I mean, you say that no deal's likely. I'm going to put, and particularly as you're calling from Belfast, because this has been really going through my head today. Isn't it more likely that when he gets to Brussels, and maybe before, in a few weeks' time, that what he does is sell out Northern Ireland? Isn't that the most likely thing that Boris will try and do?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I think...
Really?
Especially with the DUP holding, trying to help him up.
No. Patrick, he's in a minority already. Doesn't matter. He hasn't got a majority in Parliament. The DUP aren't relevant anymore. They were very relevant, of course, for the last 3 years or so, but they're not, or the last 2 years, certainly, but they're not anymore. Patrick, isn't he likely to say that the backstop just applies to Northern Ireland and thereby putting the province in which you live in a different constitutional position to the rest of the United Kingdom? Isn't that what he's going to do?
I don't think so. I think he is determined to actually go with as you're so fond of saying, a clean break Brexit.
Yeah.
I think he is completely determined to do this. And, you know, if you were to look at all the people who are... I mean, I do believe, for example, Labour is completely scared witless of a general election because they know they're going to get wiped out. But also, the other thing you have to consider is also all the Conservative members, all the other people who are against Brexit. Whenever it does eventually happen, they know they're going to get defeated, and that's why they're putting so much pressure on him. I mean, I'm sure we're seeing a lot of things off the that aren't actually being mentioned or being commented on. He's under an awful lot of pressure to actually just do away and go with a deal. I'm sure he is. But the key thing is, I actually genuinely do believe he will do it, because you are right in saying that the UP were essential at one point, but they're also still pretty important as well.
Well, of course they're important. But Patrick, I mean, look, there are push-me-pull-yous on Boris the whole time, and they're pretty big ones. But his instinct, Patrick, will be to go for Mrs May's treaty. That's my view. You have a different one. I hope you're right, Patrick. I thank you for your call, and I hope that I'm wrong, but I really don't think I am. Jackie from Watford says, it's about time Ken Clarke was knighted. He's a national treasure. Well, you never know, Jackie. In a few weeks' time, he could be the interim Prime Minister, so a knighthood would be a bit premature. And you know something? I disagree with Ken Clarke on the European question. I always have done. And yet, on a personal level, I've always got on with him superbly well. Utterly charming man who, unlike so many of our dullard career politicians today, actually has interests and hobbies outside politics. He's a proper bloke. We need more of them, whatever their view in politics. Let's go to Orpington, another constituency whose MP is walking away, and speak to Luke. Luke, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Listen, I think the Greens will be happy because it seems like Boris is into recycling, don't you think? Rehashing the old deal.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I've had steroids, but recycling's even better. It does look like it, Luke, doesn't it?
To me, it's like putting a badly made cup of tea back in the microwave to warm it up again. It just tastes disgusting. And he's being more slippy than Johnson baby oil. There's enough of those things. I just want to say... Go on. I've found out a very good one, Nigel. Seriously, I've looked into the research. Labour and Liberal Democrats have said all along they didn't want the Parliament to be closed, correct?
Yes.
Now, let's have a look at the facts or the evidence that we have before us, and that is that since the early part of this year, they have been selling tickets for their conference. If that's the case, they wanted the conferences to happen. They know that Parliament does not happen during conference. They've been selling conference tickets since January for Labour.
I think, Luke, since the war, I've been getting on 75 years or so, that every conference season Parliament's closed, and all the hue and cry over the so-called prorogation because he called a Queen's speech was absolute nonsense. Luke, if they were that worried, they could have voted. They could have voted to be there in August and not be in Tuscany, couldn't they?
They would not have sold out the tickets continuously to try and fill up their auditoriums, which is fantastic. That's fine.
Yes.
But don't expect everyone to keep Parliament open. If that's the case, I think they caught themselves out there.
Yep. No, Luke, OK, it's a fair point you've made. I thank you very much indeed on Facebook. I get Bercow being lined up for a job in the EU, says Patrick. Well, who's to say? Maybe he is. I don't know, but he's certainly been a great supporter. Ewan's asking, will MPs get paid for the next 5 weeks? They will, Ewan, because they'll be going off to party conference, and I've no doubt they will be out diligently doing constituency work. You could let me know whether you think that's right or whether it's not. Larry makes the point on Facebook, and it's actually quite a powerful one. He says, this stinks of another referendum. And that's, that is, I think, even though there's no great public demand for it, that is increasingly a bit of a fear that I've got. Isn't Parliament being hypocritical? They complain they've not enough time for Brexit and spent hours praising Bercow. And Bercow got up and made this address at 3:30, and the tributes went on until 5 o'clock. An hour and a half on isn't he a jolly good fellow? Labour MPs all standing up and applauding him, even though it's not parliamentary to clap. And there you are. Didn't see many people on the Tory benches standing up and cheering, but hey-ho. Let's go to Max in Lewisham. Max, good evening.
Oh, good evening, Nigel. Thanks for having me. Yes, I'm calling you because earlier you were speaking about having elections, having new parliament, and I'd argue that actually we should have another referendum with a Remain option on the ballot.
Well, but Max, we've done that.
No, we haven't done that.
We did. No, 23rd of June, 2016, Max. It's all done and dusted, matey. We voted to leave.
There was a loose question, and then the government did its homework. We should judge what they have done. The people have.
How is leave or remain a loose question, Max?
It's a loose question because there were promises made that leave would have been an easy deal. You made those promises.
I said no deal's better. I said, hang on, Max. I said no deal's better than a bad deal. No deal's better than a bad deal.
After the referendum.
No, Max. I said no deal's better than a bad deal every day for the last 12 days of the referendum.
Absolutely.
You calling me a liar, Max?
For an easy deal. People voted for an easy deal. People voted for what was the message done by the Leave campaign during the referendum, and that would be an easy deal. It would be like Norway, something like that. Nobody voted for a no deal.
So what happens, Max? If you force this wretched referendum upon us again and cause goodness knows how much division in this country, and when you get
just as wretched.
Hang on, Max. So when you force your second referendum upon us, and this time we vote by a much bigger margin to leave, what then?
Then we would leave.
Really? Why would we? Do you think Lord Adonis would accept it if we voted to leave a second time?
Yes, he would. He would also.
Wow.
He would definitely if that was set in law.
Well, the leader of the Lib Dems, has already said
a different referendum.
She's already said she won't accept the result, even if we vote to leave a second time. I mean, these aren't Democrats in Parliament, Max, are they? Hello? Max, they're not Democrats in Parliament. They'll never accept us leaving.
Well, that's what you're saying because you're batting for your side. That's fair enough. But in reality,
Max, I mean it. Max, we run out of time. I'd love to talk to you all evening. I really would. But it's now 6:47 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz.
Parliament will be suspended for the next 5 weeks after MPs vote tonight on whether to hold a snap general election ahead of the Brexit deadline. After 10 years in the job, John Bercow's announced he's quitting as Commons Speaker and the MP for Buckingham at the end of October unless...
Big change of tone with Boris today. There he was in Dublin. He overwhelmingly wants a withdrawal agreement. Just twiddle with a backstop and it'll all be absolutely fine. Leaving with no deal. Where's all the bravado gone? Now it would be a failure of statecraft. Is he selling out? Is he being pragmatic? Billy on YouTube says, are you sure Boris hasn't got an ace up his sleeve? Billy, He didn't look today like a man that did, but I could be wrong. Let's go to Dean, who's calling from Walsall. Dean, good evening.
Oh, no.
We're doing our best, Dean. We're doing our best. So, is Boris selling out, or is it just the pragmatic thing to do?
Personally, I think...
No, Dean, that line's utter rubbish. We're going to come back to you. I'll go to Chris, a new caller from Lowestoft instead. Good evening, Chris.
Hello, Nigel, you all right?
I am all right, but disappointed. You know, where's the Boris bravado gone, Chris?
Not entirely sure. I mean, as you say, a couple of weeks ago, absolute filled with optimism. Now he appears to be watching him there with Leo Varadkar, looked really defeatist, and you know, the optimism and pragmatism appears to have gone. And what I wanted to call about, following your earlier contribution about a second referendum, either option, whatever the eventuality on the new revised referendum paper, is completely skewed in the direction of the Remain camp. So, you know, even if you took Remain completely off the ballot paper and just had, you know, vote leave with a deal or without a deal, all of the Remainers are going to vote for with a deal, and then half of the Leave is going to vote for with a deal. So, regardless of the options, it will either be Remain or leave with a deal.
Well, even more worrying, Chris, than that, I thought was John McDonnell's suggestion yesterday, quite widely trailed today in the press. He was suggesting that the second referendum question should be Remain or the withdrawal agreement.
Well, that's quite worrying. That's so far from...
Do you know what, Chris? I wouldn't vote.
What's that?
I wouldn't vote. I wouldn't bother. What's the point?
No, it makes no sense. We don't... Essentially, last week, they all voted to confirm we couldn't vote in a general election. I mean, how frustrating is that?
So we can't have Brexit. They voted for that. We can't leave on the 31st of October with a clean break, and we can't have a general election. And they wonder, Chris, they wonder why 82% of people in a Delta poll published by The Sun on Sunday said they'd reduced Parliament last week to a laughingstock and damaged our democracy.
I can't argue with you on that, Nigel.
No, absolutely no, nor can I. I think it's right. Chris, thank you. I'm going to rattle on and go to Gareth, a new caller from Rochdale. Good evening, Gareth.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
Well, I suppose, to be honest with you, Gareth, listening to Boris today, I'm a bit disappointed.
Yeah, I'm a bit disappointed. I do think, though, that... I think if it gets to the 18th... and he does betray the vote, then that's one thing. I think we might be being a bit premature, to be honest. I think this is exactly what Corbyn wants in delaying the election as long as possible, so people do start turning on what lead the Conservatives have. And it sounds, by listening through to tonight, it sounds like it might be working. It's a little bit disheartening, to be honest.
Well, Gareth, you know, I mean, of course, none of us can truly know what Boris actually wants to do. But all I would say to you is this. Not only was the tone very different to that we saw a few weeks ago, but the body language today was completely different. He looked deflated to me, Gareth.
Yeah.
Listen, it must be... I mean, your brother doing that to you in public must be truly shocking and awful, and I do feel for him on that. I mean, and don't misunderstand me, I like Boris Johnson. I do like him, but I just sense now he feels the only way he can keep the rest of the Conservative Party together, given the numbers that are running off and going away, is to try and get them to unify around the treaty, the withdrawal agreement treaty, with an amendment to the backstop. And I think he'll actually kill the Conservative Party in the long run, Gareth, if he does that.
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, it might just be me being a little bit naive, but I suspect that he's got something up his sleeve. You're right. He does seem very, very dejected, but I mean, he's got it from all sides, hasn't he? Literally.
But somebody, Gareth, with a great card up their sleeve tends to have a little bit of swagger and maybe a slight twinkle in the eye. We saw none of that today.
No, you're right. You're right.
I don't know. I'm a bit pessimistic, Gareth. Thank you for your call. I'm going to go back to Dean, who called me earlier from Walsall. The line was rubbish. Go for it, Dean.
Hello, mate. You all right?
Well, I'm all right, yes. So, is Boris selling out, Dean?
Personally, Nigel, I think he's done all he can possibly do. Of everyone who's been dealing with this Brexit, he has tried more than anyone.
get us out of there. It's just everyone's against him. But I've got a quick question for you.
Well, hang on, Dean. We haven't even got to the European summit yet. And he's now changed his tune. He's saying overwhelmingly he wants the withdrawal agreement. That is a change, isn't it?
It is, but it's kind of been forced on him, hasn't it? No.
All right, okay, Dean. If I take, all right, no. Listen. I don't totally agree, but I take your point. You wanted to ask me something.
I did, yes. I was a UKIP supporter. I am now a Brexit supporter. Yeah. Just a quick question for you. Do you not feel in some way a little bit responsible, Nigel, by walking away after the referendum? Do you not think if you'd have stayed around, that we may have had a better fight? To get through this Brexit deal?
2 points on that, Dean. Number one, I thought 25 years of my life was enough, and I think that's quite a reasonable thing to think. And secondly, I think UKIP had tied itself so in knots by the end of that referendum that it was never going to be a viable political force again. So
I do agree with you on that, Nigel, but I also believe that with you running that party, politics, it was on the verge of a massive smash in politics, basically. You was nearly there.
Well, I think, Dean,
I understand you walking away, Nigel.
I didn't walk away. I just stepped back a little bit, Dean, after a quarter of a blooming century.
Yes,
yes. You're not alone in thinking that, and others think, that I should be doing this forever. But, Dean, after a short interim, I did come back with the Brexit Party with a fresh start. And I tell you what, one thing Boris Johnson needs to worry about if he does go for a rotten deal and push it through Parliament is what the Brexit Party could do to him in the future. Dean, I thank you. I thank all of you for your calls. For those of us that are Brexiteers, a disappointing day in Dublin, I would suggest. I'm back tomorrow at 6. At 10 tonight, it's Ian Payne. But up next, it's Ian Dale.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Well, it's been a bit of a